Hello, hello. Okay, today we are talking about a good one. So I know last week we talked about lightening the mental load, and part of lightening the mental load comes with asking our partner for help. And this is like the number one question I get, and the number one question that I see from any like mom life coach. And I think that it's really interesting because I used to be in this space. I don't know if I ever really like asked myself but how do I ask my partner for help? It was more of a I don't know. I should be okay needing help, and what is he going to think of me because I need help? Like it was more of that situation. And so I kind of wanted to take it back to like the beginning of my marriage because I feel like that would be super beneficial for you. And that is one, getting married at the age of 19 and having our first baby just months after we got married. For those of you who don't know my story, I got pregnant at 18. We got married in February. My first was born in July. And my husband is also 19. He's only a month older than me. And so we were still pretty young. We hadn't lived a lot of life, and we were trying to figure it out together. And now, when you come together, like this is how I want to preface this. And I just want you to know, I am going to be speaking from a place assuming you have a more supportive partner. And I kind of feel like mine was more supportive than I gave him credit for in the beginning, but let's just start here. So, when you have a relationship, these are just like things and truths that I want to share that I've learned over 17 years of being married, doing a shit ton of therapy, and a lot of coaching for myself and breath work. There are some things that I have learned that I wished I would have known, especially as a teenager. And so, this is something that we really try to teach our kids now and just let them know that it's a thing, even though they don't always want to listen to us. But one of those things is when you marry somebody, when you come together in a partnership. Now, for me, I was in the era of you only go to therapy if you have a problem, if something's wrong with you. I had done a little bit of therapy in my teen years, but I did not have a great experience. But the therapy that I had done was through the religion that I was a part of. And so it really wasn't beneficial for me to come at it from that angle. And so here we are. Here we are. And I have now I'm over a year into therapy now. And the changes that I have made when I finally found a really good therapist has been incredible. The things that it has done for our relationship, the things that it has helped my husband shift into. But I will say, the biggest thing that has been a huge help is when I started focusing on myself and I stopped focusing on trying to change my partner. Because when you come together in a partnership, you are also bringing all of your childhood trauma along with you. And when I say childhood trauma, you have big T trauma, you have little t trauma. So for those who are not familiar with trauma, the entire population has trauma in some form or another. So if you're like, well, I don't have any trauma, I had a good childhood, you probably have trauma in there somewhere. But big T trauma is like your sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, all of that. I did have that for myself in my childhood. And then your little T trauma, which is what the majority of the population has if they do not have big T trauma, is a kid calls you stupid on the playground in second grade, or a teacher makes a comment to you that you still remember or affected your life up until this point. And that could just, and the only reason the only reason for the trauma is your nervous system at that age did not have the capacity to process that emotion and that feeling in the way that it needed to be processed. And it could also be that maybe you didn't have the support. Maybe you didn't go talk to your mom about it and have her help you process through it, whatever it is. And I feel like a lot of this also takes place like in our teen years because we just don't want to talk to our parents, right? And so we all have trauma in some way, shape, or form. Now, we also have learned behaviors that stem from childhood. So, if you think about what you learned in your home about a relationship growing up, and now what your partner has learned in their home growing up, now you are coming together in a marriage, in a relationship, and you both have these ideals as to how a husband or a wife should like behave, right? And then you also have these, I call them like unwritten contracts, unwritten manuals. You also have an unwritten manual as to how you as a woman think that your husband should be, and your husband maybe has one as to how he thinks you should be, and they're all based on your past experiences. Now, this is why moving forward, I am a huge proponent of people doing therapy before marriage. Like I saw this quote that said, if only people put as much effort into planning their marriage as they did their wedding, we would have a lot better relationships out there. And I believe that to be so, so true. Knowing what I know now and being where I am right now, 17 years later into my marriage, it has been a ride. I will just say that. So, when my husband and I first got married, bringing along all of our childhood baggage in our suitcases, we had these unwritten manuals for each other. I was really codependent. This is something that I've actually been working on, like severing my hyper codependence, because I was super codependent. Like I was ditching my friends in high school to hang out with him. I was like all of these behaviors that I now recognize simply because I never had a dad in my life. Like I didn't have that father figure in the way that I desired it. And I saw my friends parents having amazing relationships. I have one friend whose house, I was over at her house a ton, and to see how cute the relationship between her parents were just like blew my mind. And so I like grasped onto this desire of wanting this. And so when I met Dustin, my husband, I dropped everything to hang out with him, to be with him. I didn't realize it was actually really healthy to have separation too. And so that was me. And then for him, like, I don't know his full side. Well, I mean, I do know his full side, but I'm not gonna try to like pick it apart like I'm going to mine, because that's his story to tell. But his family, just by observing his parents' behavior, they very much have the gender roles. His parents were at every sporting event. His dad was very much the head of the household, which is also taught in the religion that I was raised in. And just very much a male dominated religion, truly. And so that's what I believed I was supposed to be, was the good little girl, right? The wife who was polite and respectful and bent to his every command and took care of him and put dinner on the table when he got home at night. And his main job was to provide for the family, and it was my job to take care of everything else. And this was told to me by a friend. I remember her saying to me one day, she's like, yeah, well, my husband makes the money, so it's my job to take care of everything else. And I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, I need to make it my job. And I literally like made it my mission and my job to do that. And it didn't feel good. And eventually the resentment grew. And if you listened to last week's episode, the passive aggressive comments about like, gee, I'd love to see the day where you vacuum a house. Here we are. The day has come. 17 years later, the day has come. But and so we have all of our own shit. We have all of our own beliefs, is what I'm trying to say with all of this. I'm just trying to give you examples that maybe you can see in your life how and why your husband shows up the way that he does, and how and why you show up the way that you do. And There's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. Obviously, abuse is bad, right? Emotional abuse, physical abuse. Emotional abuse is actually worse than physical abuse. It has long-term psychological effects, as I have learned from my childhood. Um, so we have all this shit we bring with us. And also, my little disclaimer here, I am not a therapist. I have done a lot of therapy for myself, but I am not a therapist. This is like all my perspective and what I believe to be true about how we can make it work if we have a willing and able partner, right? And so we bring all of our shit along with us. And if you haven't done couples therapy before getting married, then we're not starting off on the best foot. Like, that is my new belief. That is something that I will get my kids. When they get engaged, they will do therapy. And they've been in therapy. I've had all of my kids in therapy. I just want to give them the tools, right? And we can lead by example, but mom's not always the coolest person to talk to. And so I want to get my kids the support. But anyways, back to the relationship thing. We bring all of our baggage along. And so a lot of times, if we do not have super open communication, which my husband and I did not have and have not had for a very long time, up until probably the past year, then some of these things are just not things that we talk about. And if you have a lot of, and I don't want to say it, like, I feel like I talk about having trauma a lot. I have a lot of trauma in my past, but I just recognize that that is what has shaped my behavior. And so if you have a lot of trauma from your past, the first thing that like we have to recognize is that it's okay to need support. A lot of times people who have a lot of trauma or neglect in their home as children, um, we learn to become hyper independent and rely on ourselves. We can't rely on anybody else. We can't ask for help because they'll probably let us down. And so that has been my learned behavior, which is where self-abandonment really comes in, which is why I have been really good at throwing myself under the bus, telling myself this is just how life is, sucking it up and getting the shit done. And that's great and all until you start to go on this personal development journey like I did. I've been on a personal development journey, personal growth, whatever you want to call it, for over 14 years now. And as I began to change, my life did not feel good anymore. I went from this is just how it is to holy shit. I like really dislike my husband right now because look at him. He gets to come home and be the fun dad. He gets to come home and I've got a hot meal on the table for him. I'm working part-time, but he's working full-time, but I'm still doing everything else. Like, these were all the thoughts that started to play out in my mind. And if you're here, that's okay. I think if there's one thing that I just wish I had was the knowing this is okay. This isn't wrong. This isn't bad. Yes, it sucks. Yes, your experience is valid. People always have it worse. And another form of a trauma response is when you're like, well, there are people out there who have it worse than me. No, no, no. Your experience is valid. I want you to know that. Your suck is valid. And you get to believe that it sucks right now. And you also get to know that you get to change it. And so I just want to preface like all of this with all of that. Like, oh my gosh, the work to be done. And there are still days where I tell my therapist, like, this would be so much easier to work through on my own because now we've got two people in one house, two adults who are working through their shit. And it's hard because there's big emotions and there's all of that. But anyways, so just knowing and understanding yourself, if you see any of my story within you, like you're like, oh my gosh, I resonate with this, that is great. Because now you have gained more of an awareness into yourself and why you do what you do, why you show up the way that you do. We are taught to people please in childhood, when you do something and then your parents clap for you and it makes them so happy. Like, these are conditioned behaviors and we all have them. And so whatever your past looks like, just know you can change it in the future. I never believed that I could change And here I am. My husband and I recover so much quicker from any disagreements. He's vacuuming the house. He's doing laundry. He's unloading the dishwasher without being asked. My kids have chores. We have boundaries in place. Life flows so well right now. Does it still feel overwhelming at times? Absolutely. We drive an hour one way to go to wrestling twice a week. It was 4 days a week and we decided to cut it down. And so there's still like a lot that happens, but I don't hardly ever hit that place of like shifting back into survival mode. And that is what I want for you. That is the point of this. So I do want to say, no matter where you came from, you can change. And the first step being, it's okay to need help. That is normal. And you were never meant to do it all on your own. And so I just want to put that out there. And then and maybe if you don't have any like trauma, any qualms with like needing help from other people, never had any problems with it in your past, you're just good and dandy, then you're going to jump to like step 2 here, which is, what do I need? What do you need? Here is something that I have been struggling with and something that is still really hard for me to ask my husband for. We both work full-time from home and I need him to leave. Like, and I don't think any two people or any mom and her kids were ever made to spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week together. I just don't think that we were made for that. As humans, we still need our space. And I am a very extroverted person, but when you are raised, let's just say you are raised in a home, and this is just like my own personal experience. You were raised in a home with a tiger. Let's just say we didn't have a real tiger, right? Like it was a parent, a sibling, whatever it was. And everything you did was wrong. It was always your fault. And you kind of got belittled growing up. Well, once you leave your home and move in, your partner becomes your next closest relationship. So basically, to your nervous system, you're in a home with a tiger, and it's probably a nicer tiger. And maybe that tiger is so sweet and so good, but to your nervous system, it's the situation itself. And so for me, the need of needing space so that I can record these podcasts. Like, I don't know why I still struggle a little bit. Like when he's home, I'm like, I just want to talk freely and I just want to like record and just know that I'm here and it's just me and my thoughts. And so lately I've really been struggling needing space because then it has been like me and my husband together constantly. And then the kids come home from school. So then it's all of us together. And I've just been feeling super overwhelmed. And finally we were on a walk the other night and I said, babe, I don't know how to ask you this. Like, I still struggle even asking you this because I'm afraid that you're going to get upset or hurt or like whatever, even though he's never gotten like mad at me for asking for a need. It's a similar situation to my past. And so just look at your past a little bit and see, how were you raised? When you asked for help, did you get the help from a parent? What's your relationship like? And look at that, because when you then get married, move into a house together or whatever, or even if you're not married and you move in with your partner, it's the same situation that you're recreating. And so I want you to really think about that. Your nervous system is going to feel the same. So by him being home all the time, it's like having a tiger in the house. And so my nervous system, I've got to be hyper vigilant. I've got to be a good girl. I've got to do my stuff. I got to be in the other room. I've got to not be too loud so that I don't interrupt his working. I don't want to talk to him too much. Like all of these things go through my mind. And so asking for that need is really hard. And discovering what I need, like it took me a little bit of my dysregulated nervous system, even though I was doing all the things. Like I do breath work every morning, I journal every morning, I futurecast, I do it all. And I just kept having this feeling like bubble up in me and I couldn't quite pinpoint it. And I realized I needed space. And so when you are able to sit quietly with yourself, like step 2 is just asking yourself, what do I need? Like, what do you need? I want you to really think about that because we don't think about that. Like, and I know that was redundant, but like a lot of times we don't sit down to think about what do I actually need, right? We are just surviving life. We are trying to get through it. And it's hard. It's hard, especially if you're in survival mode and not knowing what you need. And so, a really good way to look at this is just like look at the areas of your life. When do you feel the most overwhelmed? When do you feel the most frustrated? And um, where do you feel like you are swimming barely with your head above the water? Barely, barely with your head above the water. And just take a minute to like journal that out. Pull out a notebook. This is an actionable podcast. We're going to notebook this. But so I want you to really think about that. And you can come back after and re-listen and I will drop the questions, but I really want you to think about what do you need? For me, I needed support with household chores. Like I was trying to do the laundry, I was trying to clean. I love deep cleaning the bathrooms once or twice a week and vacuuming, like everything, right? But then we've got to get kids to activities and make sure that they have all their stuff. If you listened to the mental load last week, you'll know. And if you haven't listened to it, go back to last week's after this one and listen to that one as well. So just ask yourself, what do you need? What parts of your day don't feel good? When do you feel the most overwhelmed? And just start to recognize that. And then I want you to pick one ask. This is one thing that felt so horrifying to me was when I was going to ask for help because we're not sure how our partner's going to respond. Even if they've never flown off the handle or given us a reason to fear them, they are the tiger, at least to my nervous system. He is the tiger. And so I want you to really think about one area that you are really struggling in, one little task that you are feeling like you could use more support, and just bring it to his attention. Like bring it to their attention and just say, you know what, like I've really been struggling to do this. Can you help me put a chore chart together? And again, I will drop the link to that below. Because I do have a Canva template that you can go in and customize for yourself because we have to get that mental load out of our brain and onto something so that we are no longer carrying anybody else's mental load but our own and those things that are necessary. So bring it to your husband's attention, your partner's attention, and just say, hey, this is where I am really needing support. Can you help me? And they can say yes or no. Remember, we can't control our partner. And if they say no, then I want you to ask yourself, how can you get yourself the support? If they are not willing to help you, this is where a boundary gets put in. You're going to find as you start on this journey, you set really powerful boundaries too, because your boundaries protect your inner peace. Okay, so if they say no, you say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and hire this out. I had a friend who finally got fed up with her husband and he's an accountant. So during tax season, I mean, it's crazy hours. And she finally told him, she's like, you know what? If you're not going to be home at a normal hour, I'm going to hire a babysitter to come in twice a week so that I can have some time and space for myself. And she did it. And so that is what I call a boundary. And a boundary is not, it's the intention behind it. It is not to control people. It is to protect your inner peace. And so if your partner cannot help you with this thing, let's just say it's mowing the lawn. Hey, babe, can you mow the lawn one day a week? Like, I'm really struggling to stay on top of everything else. And they say, you know what? Like, I don't really have time or I don't really want to. Great. I'm going to hire that out. And then you hire somebody to come mow your lawn. You hire a kid to come mow your lawn for $10 a week. Like, that is a boundary that is so healthy. And your husband or your partner might have a lot of feelings about it, a lot to say about it, maybe a lot of frustration, maybe about the money spent, whatever. But you also do not have to pick up those pieces. Like, I go so deep in a lot of my programs and in my membership on this stuff because there is so much more here to unpack. And I'm trying to unpack what I can, but boundaries, my friend, boundaries. They're going to be, I was telling my therapist a couple weeks ago, I was like, I feel like I'm in my like villain era. Like I feel like a rebel because setting boundaries is now fun. And my husband is like, what the hell? He's like, what are these? He's like, oh, I don't have any boundaries for you. And here's what's funny. He never had to have boundaries for me because I always self-sacrificed to bend myself to his every want and desire. He never asked me to. This was a learned behavior from childhood, right? So it wasn't his fault. It was my choosing. And now I get to choose different. And now he has put a few boundaries in place. So do you see how this starts to reshape your entire life? This starts to reshape your kids' lives, your relationships. Like, how incredible that now your kids get to see the example of you truly creating a life that you love. I am not even going to pretend that this is easy, but it is so, so worth it. I promise you that. It is a lot of hard work. And yes, there will be times, especially when your husband decides to dive in or your partner decides to dive in and also start doing the work on themselves, then they have their own big emotions and you get to navigate that together. And I will say, I would not go back to the way that we were living at the beginning of our marriage in a million years. I love where we are at. I love where we are headed. We are getting on the same page in life with our wants, with our desires. I feel supported. Like he unloads the dishwasher without me even saying a word. Who does that? Like, I never thought I would see this day. This is what I want for you. This is what I want for you. And I am here to teach you how. This is like my purpose on this earth. And I have a program. It is called Empowered Mom. And we go through every freaking area of your life. This is like my drop the mother effing mom life struggle course. And it's actually a group coaching program. It's 6 weeks long. It's 5 weeks of modules and then a week of Q&A. We do a coaching call each week. And then you also have access to the modules for life. And I do plan as I continue to learn more and get at a higher and higher level in my relationship with my kids, within my home. I plan to add modules to this as I learn more so that you learn more as well. Like it grows with you through your whole life and it is incredible. And so actually the link's going to be in the show notes. I keep forgetting I'm like recording a podcast. I just feel like I'm talking to somebody right now. But I'm going to drop the link in the show notes so that you can come and join us. We start, I believe it'll be next week. So come join us in the program. It is going to be incredible. It's an incredible price point. If you join with this code, you are going to get 50% off. It is currently $444, so you will get it for $222. Podcast 50 is the code. And come jump in. $222 I'm like creating this coupon code on the fly. I didn't create this before, so I'm like trying to write it down so I don't forget it. But I want to give you, my avid listeners, like a deal because you deserve a life that you love to live. And now that I am on the other side of all of this work, after struggling for so many years in my marriage, financially, in our relationship, to being where we are at now, I want this for you. Like, I want for you to live a life that feels good to you. I want you to do things that feel good for you. I want you to be the example for your kids, teaching your kids what life can look like and how good it can be so that when they move out, they also get to create a life because my mom did it. How freaking cool is that? So it's time to drop the mother effing mom life struggle, step into your most empowered mom self, and truly create a life you love with kids in tow. And I will talk to you next time.